on the lies. What I find is a play on a stage, controlling minds like a hive. And when I shine a light on the lies, what I find is a play on a stage, controlling minds like a hive. When I was young, I believed what they told me.
Welcome to Tending the Threshold, a multi-episode series where we explore the question, how do we come together as things fall apart? This episode in particular is called Sustainable Activism, Radical Attunement Work in Action. So today I'm here with my co-host Jamie, and I'm curious if you want to say a couple sentences about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. So first of all, thank you for agreeing to do this project with me. It's just a real delight, and it feels really amazing to be able to take some action to bring awareness right now during these times. My name is Jamie Powell, and I'm the founder of Transformative Arts Collaborations, and I'm a community activist located here in Ashland, Oregon, but my playground is the planet right now with everything going on. I feel really connected to so much that I'm hearing and seeing in the world. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And my name is Holly Truhlar. I'm a lawyer, a transpersonal grief therapist, and aรื่องorganizer. I know last time we went a little more into our identities, and now we have special guest Desiree Continho, who shared some amazing poetry last time, and will share a piece of yours in just a couple minutes as well. And I want to welcome you and have you introduce yourself, and also sort of through this question of what identities do you lead with, Desiree?
Yeah, that's a great question, one I'm always grappling with, and answers always changing. I definitely lead with being a woman and an artist, poet, social activist. I am also a mother. I have a beautiful 6-year-old daughter. I work for a local nonprofit called Vision Quilt, and they're committed to preventing gun violence through the power of art and inclusive dialogue. So that's been a new identity, preparing for graduate school this fall, so kind of reclaiming an identity as a student. And probably one of the most interesting, sometimes confusing and sort of obvious identities for me is I'm a brown-skinned person. And I say confusing because I was raised in upper middle class, suburban, very white neighborhood in the Bay Area. And my family's from a part of India, Goa, that was colonized by the Portuguese over 400 years ago. And so as I'm doing this exploration of my own racial identity, kind of getting the opportunity to examine my own program of whiteness and the effects of colonization as it's kind of entwined in my roots, and that exploration of being a person of color in the world today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I know it takes a lot of courage to really unpack our identities, and also I just appreciate the vulnerability it takes to say, yeah, I'm kind of confused about my identities, and I'm still playing with them, and I can resonate with some of that too. So thank you for sharing. And in a minute, we'll share another poem of yours. So another identity I prescribe to you and so appreciate about you is I just see you as a culture maker and a change agent through your spoken word and other things you do too. But yeah, really just inspired by you. So I want to do a quick overview of the radical attunement work model that we're going to walk through with a political or collective example in this episode. So if we can just pull up the graphic of the overview of the raw work, and I'm going to walk through it really quickly before we share your poem. So radical attunement work is a model that helps people move from a place of exploitation and domination into a place of cooperation and attunement. And there's 4 phases. The first is acknowledgement, the second is awareness, the third is activation, and the fourth is ascension. And we'll talk more about that. And last episode, we really went into more of the quadrants and what each of them mean. And so we'll have a discussion that'll walk us through. And before we do that walkthrough, I want to call up Desiree's poem and have us listen to it. I think it'll really provide some fertile ground for us to explore a particular political topic as it comes up. So now we're going to hear a piece of Desiree's spoken word called Where the Forest Meets the Street.
I'm where the forest meets the streets. In the quiet commotion of my town, feet on bare ground. There's a weed eater, a bird feeder, the sound that carries through the grass and leaves. I'm playing cat's cradle with the space between us, harvesting clouds from the ocean, counting rivers and roads, discovering rickety bridges, hiding in homes. You know, everyone's tired of feeling alone. I've stepped on the landmines in the minds of my people. The world is in color, but all the pieces that see it grind in the machine, wheels working in the dark, black hollow of my skull. Where violence happens before an act of violence. Spreads like a common cold. A gang war, a terror that makes a border people will not cross. It's the cost of life, fear spreading. We better start collecting the broken pieces of ourselves so that we can be strong enough to speak for stolen children. Our destructive tendencies broken open, the unsteady drone of a motor, it's the grief we are holding. We will live with this. It's hate I love to hate. Firecrackers in a classroom, school drills just in case. A warehouse made for storing kids. We'll pack a picnic for the heart of the disease. I'm where the forest meets the street, fleeing myself to outrun a history of terrorism. Children in a boarding school, on a plantation, buried under glory and patriotism. Is it them you fear? Is it us? Is it a shadow? Is it a gun? Is it love? Is it a country won and worn on your sleeve? Is it the dream of sons and daughters displaced? The face of a child with their family erased. It's a race. Quick, get in the car, drive to the other world, glory's price paid 100-fold. Yellow mustard that grows in a planter box, the price of blood, the debt of a soul. A marigold prayer floating by candlelight, going once, going twice, sold to the highest bidder, the biggest fibber. Fear made you meek. You can't hide from what you seek now, 'cause the mess is at your feet. You see, America took a loan from the devil that we're still paying back. The streets are like that. They lead to locked doors, cages somewhere, children imprisoned. Maybe we can practice building bridges, 'cause my wish is for something stronger than hope, something worth more than gold, than the pieces of paper that say you can own land, objects, people. It's a rope I throw across the creek as the current travels where the city meets the street of my town. I'm on cement paths that turn back to dirt, feet on the ground. I'm the vulnerability of bare earth. Just guessing, it must hurt to lose your child, not knowing where to find them. The big, wide world eating them up. But I'm where the manicured gardens are cut into comfortable squares, easy to measure, not so unfair, but beware the steps you traverse. And how to discern the true laws. Demand truth. Only your soul can free you. Demand truth that doesn't fade or break or look away. Pray for truth to save you. I'm where the forest meets the street, unraveling the long cord of my grief. It's a moonset over mountains, a wildfire in the badlands, a riverbed, a swallow's nest, a fox's den, a gray open field where we'll meet again.
Thank you deeply to Desiree for sharing your spoken word with us. And it's so inspiring for me to hear such a powerful message, such a confrontational message delivered with such grace and eloquence. And I'm inspired as a woman during these times to collaborate with other women, to collaborate with other people, and to join forces in this way. So thank you so much for the courage that it takes to put pen to paper and to create something and then to share it so publicly. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And so now I'm just going to ask you, Holly, to take us through the model on a political, collective level. In the last episode, we went through the model on a personal level, and now let's use Desiree's poem and some of the images and themes evoked and go through this model on a deeper, more collective level.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I just so appreciate what you're bringing here and the way you deliver it and just who you are. It's great to get to spend time with you and do this work together.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, as you were writing this poem and when you perform it, is there any political topic, collective topic that stands out for you as far as what inspired it? Or there were so many threads in there, but is there an example that feels most up for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I was feeling and exploring when this poem was coming through was around the separation of families at the border and just the immigration policies, what's the administration in our country right now in response to that.
Yeah, there was a couple times in that poem that I heard that come through and really strongly and really impacted me. So I'd love to explore that example with you guys using this model. So the first phase of the model is acknowledgement. And if we can pull up the quadrant 1 graphic for this model, we can kind of walk through. I'll ask each of you how we would acknowledge separation of families at the border. And so some of it obviously was just done in this poem and right now, but I'm curious, Desiree, how you've acknowledged separation of families at border in your life.
Yeah, I think for me it's having the conversations with people, just staying aware of what's going on. And sometimes in Ashland it's really easy to get immersed in communities that are, really blissed out. And so bringing it back down to what's going on in the world and just having conversations about it.
Yeah, great. What about you, Jamie? Are there ways that you've acknowledged it?
Yeah, I think not turning a blind eye, first and foremost, and actually researching, like looking in, there's definitely certain news channels that I like to tune into, like Democracy Now! And just to inform myself of what's going on, to stay current, and as Desiree said, to bring the conversation in, to acknowledge it with other friends and with other people who may not actually be acknowledging it in that moment.
Yeah, I think those are great examples, right? The acknowledgement phase is just, this is happening. And so there's different platforms we can do that on. I know some people really feel like social media is a way to acknowledge things. Some people feel like just personal conversations. And so I think there's a lot of ways to do that, but it sounds like you guys are doing that and I really appreciate it. So the next phase is awareness. And there's two parts to the awareness phase, and especially when we're talking about a political example, I think it's important to both do the analysis, so a historical, systemic analysis of what's happening, as well as a somatic inquiry into how does this impact me. So just as a short example with the analysis piece, we can really look at separation of families at the border in all different ways, systemically, but also historically, the ways that we have separated families, separated parents and children throughout the history of the United States. It's been used as a tool of domination. So we've seen that in slavery, and we've also seen that with indigenous boarding schools where children were separated from their parents. And so this is really a historical thing that has happened, and we know some of the impacts of it. In that it cuts off the ancestral lineage. And so there's a recovery that has to happen. There's trauma that happens for generations. So there's that analysis. And then there's also this somatic awareness piece of how it impacts me, how my heart is broken when I see this. So I'm gonna just ask you both, and I'll start with you, Jamie. How have you built awareness around the separation of families at the borders?
Well, you know, being a white woman and being in the dominant culture, it takes extra effort to reach out and inform myself and to bring awareness to that. So literally, like, actually taking a look at things that you mentioned, like the separation of African families when African people were brought over to this country as slaves, and really allowing myself to digest that information, and then looking into the boarding schools. So staying informed in that way historically. But literally when this event started to surface, I needed to lie down. I needed to like really tune into my body because I had such grief coming up, especially my work is with children a lot. I have worked with children in schools in different ways, and so I feel that deep connection of families, and so the level of mourning that was coming through was really strong when all the news headlines were coming up and all the pictures and the soundtracks of the children crying in the holding places that our government has created for this. So staying informed and feeling my body and taking some care of myself.
Yeah. And what about you, Desiree? How have you built awareness around this topic?
Yeah, I think for me, the piece you mentioned about the somatic awareness has been really key to processing a lot of this. And I know when this poem was coming through, I was at a dance, and it was a real journey for me to just embody the grief I was feeling, the rage I was feeling, and crumble, scream, cry, really imagine what it's like to be, and I am a mother, but to imagine what it's like to lose your child and how scary that is.
Yeah. I really appreciate both of those pieces, and I hear this piece of grief there, right? Looking at just the heartbreak. And that part is so important because what I see a lot of activists doing is skipping that second phase and not really being willing to go into the underworld and feel that heartbreak and that loss or the joy. And, whatever joy we do feel when something happens that's nice, but then also the heartbreak, right? Those go hand in hand. And so there can be a lot of burnout if we're not willing to actually feel it. And there can be a lot of perpetuation of violence that that we're actually trying to stop, but we're continuing if we don't really delve into that awareness phase. So then when we move out of the awareness phase, we move into activation. And that's activation informed by the awareness, informed by deep discernment. And so what this phase has to do with is just, so what's needed now? What's the right response to what's happening given my own body and what's happening inside of it, and also given the collective and the analysis. And so I'm curious for both of you, and I'll start with you, Desiree. What have you been activated to do now that you've built awareness around the topic of separation of families at the border?
Yeah, well, the poetry's one, poetry coming through, writing it, sharing it, but a big piece for me is being a mother and how to share this information, how to talk to my daughter about the system that she's living in, to be careful not to scare her, but also being honest, empowering her, educating her so that, when she grows up and goes to the world, that she has this capacity.
Yeah, I love that. I think the way we raise our children is a form of activism, so I so appreciate that. Yeah, and I'm curious for you, Jamie, how have you felt activated towards this?
Well, one is to just look at the resources that I have and the privilege that I have, and sort of like what's in my hula hoop of resources and tools that I can use. And so this show is the product of actually that, looking into the community and meeting Wanda Borland, who is the producer of the show, and connecting with you, and just seeing what are the resources that I can use to create something and build awareness. So the intention of this show is to start conversations that might not be happening, and also to inspire activism. And that's one of the ways that directly from this topic of separation of families has come through me to be able to offer for our world right now.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I would just say for me personally, some of the activation piece has been, there's been a couple of rallies or protests that I've attended in Medford, and that's been really nice to see other people doing that and to engage in that. And then also, because I have a legal background, I have volunteered to do some legal work in this realm with people, with immigrants. And so those are both ways that I've felt activated, as well as, coming together like this and just working through this topic with other people. So then the fourth phase is ascension or expansion. And what that really has to do with is just recognizing that we're a part of something larger, and really feeling that interconnectedness, that who we are and who someone else is actually intertwined. And this happens pretty naturally. Like when we go and we protect something, or we're in right action towards something, we pretty naturally then feel in this cooperative state or this relational field with them. And so an example for me would be doing this project together, and then really feeling this larger sense of connection or expansion, to which I'm then able to acknowledge more. But I'm curious for both of you, how you maybe have felt a sense of expansion as you've moved through this model with separation of families at the border. And I'll start with you, Jamie. How have you felt a sense of expansion or ascension, if at all?
Yeah, well, I think coming out of denial, it feels like the denial for me is in layers, like an onion, of can our government really be doing things that are this terrible in the world? And I think that is actually part of the ascension process for me, even though it, for some, the word ascension might feel like, oh no, it's supposed to be this elevated, state of joy. And for me, it's actually very different. It's the more I can connect to grief and mourning and face reality, for me, that is a part of the ascension process. So that's what's been going on for me, is just really the sense of grief and the sense of interconnection with the people who I'm around immediately, geographically. You too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it sounds to me like a sense of allyship, and also like shared humanity is what you're talking about a little bit. And then Desiree, I'm curious for you, how you've, if at all, how you've experienced sort of that expansion state in particular to this.
It's definitely up and down, it's not always that, but I like what you said to me, connecting with community and other people who are feeling into this makes me not feel so alone. It definitely helps art, people coming together to share their form of expression is a big part of it.
Yeah, I love that. And so the last phase, this ascension phase, I put it last because I think it is really important to first walk through these other phases. And there's a way in which psyche moves to its own rhythm, and we're sort of just following its dance a bit, right? And if I had to put ascension or expansion, I would put it last, because really we have to honor these other phases in our human incarnation before we let go and let the light in and all of these things. So I really appreciate you guys exploring this model with me. And in the last few minutes, I have a question that I want to explore, which is just the question of how are you practicing self and community care in these times? So if taking just a minute, and I guess I'll start with you, Jamie, and just ask, how are you practicing self and community care in these times?
Yeah. Well, this issue particularly struck me so deeply that I realized that this work is a lifetime work for me, that I'm a social justice activist, I'm a community activist. And so I literally needed to take a 10-day silent retreat just to take a moment to disconnect from social media and to refill my batteries. So that, and then community care, I've been cooking a lot more for people. I've been making a lot more food and sharing it with my housemates and different people in the community.
Yeah, awesome. And what about you?
Yeah, I think for me, prayer, just grieving, feeling into what's going on, giving thanks and gratitude. Also being out in nature helps me. I feel a lot of care with that. And in my community, just coming together, I think, with people through dance or poetry or music and sharing that connection.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, and I've felt that with you guys, just this sense of self and community care. Just, I think last night or the night before, we were doing like a round of appreciations, and that felt really caring to me. And I would say the other thing for me that's been really important in these times is finding ways that we can collectively regulate the sort of community's nervous system. And for me, that has a lot to do with ritual, grief rituals, and different social technologies that can really help us to witness each other and nourish each other. So that's something I'm really exploring. I'm curious if you are willing to take us out as we close out this episode.
Yeah, great timing. So I want to say thank you to both of you, and what a great way to start this series, Tending the Threshold. My name is Jamie Powell. I'm the founder of Transformative Arts Collaborations, and I'm delighted to be with Holly Truhlar and Desiree Continho. Thank you, and stay tuned for our next episodes. Bye for now.
When I was young, I believed what they told me. And when I was young, they really tried to mold me. But then somehow I knew it wasn't true. They were confused. I had a clue within my soul that led me to a higher truth. But then somehow I knew it wasn't true. I was confused. I had a clue within my soul that led me to a higher truth. When I was young, I was told the greatest story.